You are listening to the Small Town Big Talk Show, the weekly podcast for small town people with big dreams and ideas. I'm your host, Rebecca Undum, and each week we'll cover a topic meant to inspire, encourage, and empower you to live big in your small town. Although it has its challenges, nothing beats small town living, and we're committed to sharing the best of what's working in the communities we serve. So enjoy this episode, and we hope it helps you to bloom where you've been planted. My guest on today's episode is Sarah Calhoun. She is the founder of a company called Red Ants Pants, which is a company that designs workwear for women. She had no entrepreneurial experience, especially on the manufacturing side, when she had this idea based on her own need. She joins me on the show today to talk about that, talk about how Red Ants Pants started. But more than that, I got the opportunity to hear Sarah speak a couple of years ago, and she left an actual indelible impression on my heart, on my soul. And I just couldn't wait to talk to her. And you are going to gain so much wisdom, insight, and yet she delivers it. She's just wrapped in humility and modesty. And then honestly, if none of that interests you at this point, seriously, don't miss this episode and listen in for how she started the Red Ants Pants Festival, which was a festival in a field. And she has had major country music artists attend in her town of 900 people in the first year, which was in 2011. This summer will be the 10th anniversary of the festival. They had over 6,000 people attend. Think about the impact of something like that for your small town. And yes, we don't all have to start a music festival. And I think as you listen to her, she wouldn't necessarily advocate for that. But she is the literal epitome of living big in a small town. And she delivers on this podcast. I know you're going to love her. Check out the show notes for how you can stay in touch with her, how you can get your hands on some of her amazing pants, not hers, the ones they design. And maybe we should all make a road trip to White Sulphur Springs for the 10th anniversary of the festival. All of that information will be in the show notes, but seriously, grab yourself a cup of something good and sit back and glean all the inspiration you can from Sarah Calhoun. All right. Well, hey, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you were such an impressive person to me, and I know that you're probably going to get all modest and humble because you're a very humble person. But I got to hear you speak, 2 years ago, and everything that you had done, I seriously was just blown away. So I would love if you could take us through kind of the starting of your business, how you landed in the very small town of White Sulphur Springs, Montana, because it's small, right? Then we'll just kind of naturally go from there. But you've done such cool things, and you've done it in a way that honors your community, and you've done it with integrity, and you were a transplant to your small town, so many things that we can talk about. But if you want to start just by sharing a bit of your background and how Red Ants Pants came to be, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Absolutely. So I grew up on a farm back in Connecticut, of all places. And after school, I had studied environmental science at Gettysburg College, Pennsylvania, and then started working for Outward Bound, taking kids in the woods and teaching leadership. And that kind of merged into doing trail crew work across the country. And this entire time I was wearing men's work pants because there was nothing on the market for women, absolutely nothing designed for hips. And as you know, curvy women fitting into square men's pants is not always a beautiful thing.
Right.
And I had no business background whatsoever. I started talking to some other companies to see if they would start a line of workwear for women, and no one really jumped at it. One guy said, well, if you're serious about it, why don't you just start your own company? And at the age of 25, I very naively said to myself, start a business? How hard could that be?
Right.
Little did I know. Yeah, my last trail crew was in the Cascades in Washington, and I had never been to Montana, but it had always been on my list. And I drove through, found a place in Bozeman, and bought a copy of Small Business for Dummies. And this was a very, very helpful book. I literally didn't know what a business plan was at the time.
Right.
And so the very first weekend I was there in Bozeman, I started reading this book, and a guy noticed it at a coffee shop I was working at, and we get to chatting, and it turned out for the past 20 years he had done production and design for a little company called Patagonia.
That was such a cool story. I remember you sharing that and just being like, well, if that's not divine intervention, right? Yeah.
So when things fall into your lap like that, you're at least heading in the general right direction.
Right.
And he just gave me loads of contacts and advice and said, Sarah, you're onto something big here now. I think you need to move on this. And he's been a top mentor, and he's on my board of advisors to this day.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool. So the pants themselves, there was obviously a market need And it was a personal need, which I talk about a lot on this show with a variety of guests that we have. Some have businesses, some don't. But I think a lot of times the things that have been developed or created came out of our own need, like a need that we personally had, right? So if people are listening to this and they're like, how do I land, talking to the lead production guy from Patagonia, right? Like, I don't know if that'll be their story, but it is looking around and saying, what are the gaps you see in your own community, in your own life? And maybe there is something there, right? So that's such a cool thing. But one of the things too, if you'd share just a smidge about the kind of, not irreverent maybe is too strong, but like the unique and different way that you've gone about marketing, because it's a really specific flair that you have. And I think it sets you apart, besides the fact that it's workwear for women, which it's its own, it's its own category, right? But you market your products in a really cool way.
Yeah, absolutely. So that happened when I was first in Bozeman in 2004 is when I moved there. And I had a lot to learn, just figuring out how you start a new brand and a new line of apparel, and all the marketing and the logo and website and business model, never mind the sourcing and the textiles and the design and the pattern work and manufacturing and all that.
God, you chose like a super logistic heavy business too. I mean, it is not like today's world where it's like, I have an idea and I think I can sell it on the internet. I mean, it's a ton of research and work up front.
Yep, it really is. And capital and, importing fabric from overseas. And we chose to make everything in America. So all of our manufacturing is stateside, which is really important, value-based for us. And also chose to sell directly to the consumer. So we don't sell wholesale at this time. You can't just walk into your local ag store and find Red Ant's pants. So with that, we had our work cut out for us to really brand and market the pants well. So we did something called Tour de Pants. Was
it the decision from the very beginning to not sell wholesale? And if so, why? What was your thought process behind that?
Yeah. So initially, I mean, it's a huge can of worms selling retail and just understanding how that whole system works as well.
Sure. Right.
The reality is, if you're selling direct to the consumer, you get the whole margin, right? And if you we would have to sell huge volume to be able to make it work financially to sell through a middleman.
Got it.
And not to say that we couldn't do that if we wanted, and we've had some great offers, but there's also something really important to me about the personal connection with our customer. And and that's something we lose when we shop it out. So
I love it. Okay, so Tour de Pants. Let's talk about that, because that was such a fun. And I think, again, all sorts of different small town people listen to this podcast. It's not everybody has a business, but a lot of people have these ideas on their hearts that they're thinking about. And I think the choice that you made to stay really in touch with the person actually buying and wearing your pants, I think it makes a lot of decisions actually easier in some respects. But this was such a fun, cool thing that you shared. So tell us all about the Tour de Pants and how it started.
Tour de Pants. So this just literally came out. We had a great network of, and when I say we, this is me at the beginning, and my cow dog.
It's the royal we.
I was literally Monday morning staff meetings with my dog and my cat. But we took found this old Airstream actually out of Nebraska on Craigslist and put ants on the outside of it, decked it out, and went on the road selling pants, doing house parties. And we had a beer sponsor out of Missoula, and it was a really great way to get to know our customers face to face and to hear their stories and understand what drives them. And, and then we would get to visit, and it would be, again, personal connection. And then we would chat about the pants and the business and have a fun slideshow and give them beer, and then they'd try on pants, and then we'd sell them and move to the next town. And it was just a really fun way to get to know our cultural community that way.
Sure. Did you do a lot of iteration to your product based on the experience of being right there with your customer?
Yep, it's certainly, so we haven't actually changed our original work pant since 2005 when we started the design, but...
well done. Yeah, I mean, seriously, that's incredible.
Yep, but we have been adding additional lines.
Sure.
And, then there's the long list of products we want to continue designing and putting on the market. Since then, we've added a wool vest and a work shirt and shorts, and recently a lighter weight work pant with a little bit of stretch. So all that feedback is continuously affecting our design process.
Right. So how do you primarily sell your products now?
So redantspants.com is our main avenue, and that's about probably 65% of our sales. We also have a brick and mortar storefront here in White Sulphur Springs. So after about a year in Bozeman, I learned a lot, learned production on the floor and got all the groundwork done, but I wanted to be back in a small ag town. And I had read Ivan Doig's book, This House of Sky, he's a great writer of the American West. And he had grown up in White Sulphur, and this is the town he wrote his memoir about. So I found an old brick saddle shop, a historic shop that has the gorgeous 1880 tin tile ceilings, and it is actually brick and mortar. And so opened my shop in the front on Main Street, and then I live right behind the shop and have 2 apartments upstairs for rentals. So works pretty well.
One of my favorite things about your story is that, it's just like a million things that I thought was amazing and cool about you as a person. And you're a woman. And it feels like you seem to follow your intuition, which is a really powerful and cool thing to see somebody so clearly do. But the way you even came to choose the town you decided to build all of this stuff in is so cool. And when I was listening to you, I remember thinking, she is like a masterful people person and probably doesn't even really get that. It has to be one of your innate skills, because I talk to a lot of people. So I'm back in my hometown. I live in a small town in southeast North Dakota. So I'm a returner, right? Like I flew and I went to college and then I came back. And that experience has its own set of challenges. But I feel like overall, when I talk to women specifically, I would say in small towns, transplanting is a really challenging thing for a lot of people. And then there's you. And you transplanted and you bought this, like the way you just described, you're like, so I bought this beautiful saddle shop and then I did this and this and this. And the community didn't go, who is this East Coast person? Like, how on earth did you do that, Sarah? Like, it truly is remarkable. And we haven't even gotten to the festival, which we're going to talk about. But what insights can you give to people that have transplanted and move at the energy level that you do? If that makes sense.
It's a great question. And, when White Sulphur is a pretty conservative, conventional ranching town, like there's 900 people here, 2,000 in the whole county. It's the county seat, but we have a lot more cows than people for sure.
Yep.
Fantastic place. I'm from the East Coast, which is kind of a bad word out here. But the reality is I just, I was able to borrow enough money to buy, the real estate is incredibly affordable in most small towns compared to the, Bozeman's of the world.
Right.
I just started pitching in. I didn't know a soul in this county, and I was 25 years old. Didn't know what I was really getting into with this apparel company, but just worked my butt off and did the renovations on my place. And I remember I was painting out front, and this old timer comes by. He's like, "Well, we'll give you a year, in business, see how that goes." But I started volunteering on the ambulance as an EMT and coaching volleyball and joined the Arts Council and the chamber. And one of the great things about small towns is that your skills. Like if I were in Bozeman, my skills as a volleyball coach would be underutilized because they weren't on that level. But here, I could definitely step up and coach middle school volleyball. So it's neat to see what you can offer as a community member, and getting involved in the civic organizations was certainly important to me and a great way to meet people and get to know the place. And I think I've certainly seen other people move in and not have great success, but often they come with I'm going to change this to the way the place
there it is.
Was.
There it is. Yeah.
It's really important to just observe and be patient and get to know a place and a people and the customs and what makes things tick here. And not to say that it can't be changed or improved or tweaked a bit, but not to come in with that assumption that where I came from was better than here.
I think you just touched on the thing that well-intentioned people, let's just say most of the time, because I would say I think I did that when I came back. Like, I know this place. I mean, so they're like, that's why I said the challenges look different. Like they kind of present themselves differently, if you're returning versus you're new. But I definitely think I was like, I have this experience. Like I know things, people, but it's so dangerous. And I think the good intentions that you might have completely fall short in poor execution when you don't sit back. And so I think what you just said, like sit back, observe, really figure out how people already tick and immerse yourself in it as it is before you set to the work of like, I'm going to fix everything. Because maybe they don't think they need to be fixed. And then it creates walls that literally just take years or maybe forever to overcome. So I love that. I think that's awesome, that asking yourself, what can I offer in service versus in like, don't set to the work of solving problems that might not even exist. Right. And I just think
exactly
that's kind of what we do. But it's a fast track to feeling really lonely and isolated. And like you said, not having success, assimilating yourself into the community. I also think, though, there's just a combination of, I think, maybe your natural drive and your skill set that sets you apart in some ways, which is in a good way. Because, of course, this guy says, well, we'll give you a year. And I think a lot of people would be, that you have choices how you want to handle that. Like, you either crumble and think, I'm never going to make it here, or you think, okay, so this is how it is, and this is what I'm working with, right? And like, how do I not necessarily prove them wrong, but do good work, set to the task of doing good work. So it's just an amazing story. So let's talk about how the festival came about, because there too, I remember sitting there listening to you and just being like, well, I want to be this woman's friend. Like, she's amazing. Because I am wired to want cool stuff in my community. I don't like it when we get overly stagnant and like we're just kind of okay with how things are, because I question how that'll serve us 10 years down the road, right? And not the fear, but the very real challenge of how do small towns remain like relevant. And I've got air quotes around that, right? We get to choose what that means. But I want my community to be around 20 years from now. And when we think about how do we attract back people that are even younger than us and make it a place where they want to be, what does that look like, right? These are the things I think about. So when you started talking about the festival, I remember thinking, what a bold and amazing thing to do. So how did it start? Where are we at now? Because it was even 2 years ago that I saw you. I imagine things have even changed more since.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a wild ride. So after about 5 years in business with the pants company, we'd gotten through the economic downturn. We were hiring a few people part-time, and slow growth was happening. It was good. We were still alive and well, but I definitely needed to do some more bigger marketing. And this festival idea popped up, and I had a friend in the music industry, and, she was like, maybe Montana should have another music festival. Like, we don't have much going on here with the music scene. And I was like, a music festival, like that could be fun. Talked to my board of advisors, and they were like, this is the riskiest move you've ever considered, but it might be brilliant. I was working off a $0 budget to try to pull this off, and truly had no right getting into a whole nother industry that I had zero experience in. And, and this is 100 miles from anywhere, literally. We are 100 miles from the next town.
You are I drove through it when I was speaking out in Bozeman. And I remember just being like, this is White Sulphur Springs. Like I drove through it, and of course I thought of you, and I was just like, oh my gosh. Seriously, it's hard I think for some people to fathom the vastness and and truly how isolated and rural you really are. So like on every account, this festival idea was
crazy.
It's pretty nuts. Crazy. I mean, really. Yeah.
And in looking back, I still can't believe we did actually pull it off, but it took the entire community. It took all of the friends and family and social capital I had to get boots on the ground to actually do the work and have it happen. So we had that first year, we had Lyle Lovett and Jerry Jeff Walker, Guy Clark, Rodney Crowell, a whole bunch of great talent. And I had to borrow $10,000 for 2 weeks between, the advanced ticket sales and paying the talent deposits. And then amazingly, it pulled it off. And 6,000 people came that first year. And that tripled the county's population. It was insane. None of us expected that nearly that many people were going to come and that it would actually work. But it did, and it did take the whole community. We had high school groups picking rocks and filling gopher holes, and the county was watering down the roads, and we had local EMS and fire, and we bring in all our extra security and law enforcement and ambulances as well.
But that first year, just so people understand, they're picking rock and filling gopher holes in a pasture.
Yeah, so this takes place on a working cattle ranch that's donated by the Jackson family every year still. Yeah. Right, it's 3 miles outside of town.
I just want people to really understand. That's what they're picking rock in. It's a field.
It's literally just a field. And we had to build and still do build all the infrastructure up every year, power, water, porta potties, all the tents, all the site logistics. And we are now in our 10th year this summer. We've had up to 18,000 attendees over the years. It's now a 4-day event. We've had greats like Merle Haggard and Dwight Yoakam, Emmylou Harris, Winona, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, Charlie Pride, lots of fantastic music. And it's now the event of the year named by our governor for the state. So it's pretty exceptional. Yeah.
I mean, it is. You by far of everybody I've ever had on this podcast. And I mean, I just love the people that choose to come on here. But the execution of an event like this, have a 10-year run. It's just, Sarah, people listening to this are going to be like, what? If they don't know you or they don't know anything about you, they are seriously going to be blown away. Because I think there's so many things that I hope. Well, one thing, have you written a book about this? Have you written a book?
I'm trying. It's very slow progress.
Yeah. It's okay. It's not everybody's like favorite medium. And yet your story is worthy of a book. No question. Just because people, I'm sure, I remember sitting there and being like, how did you do that? And remember you said at one point, like, you know, way more about sewage disposal than you like ever imagined you'd have to know. Yeah. But I think if you could distill it down, what are just a couple of big, like if you can, like big lessons, things that you absolutely either mindset wise had to have, I would say, like what mindset did you have to have going into this? And then resources, because you touched on something where I think you are a genius of managing and leveraging your social capital. You said social capital. I think a lot of times we think all it is money. It is so much more than money. Money in some respects sometimes can be the easy thing to check off, So I don't know if you can do that. I didn't prep you with that, but like,
absolutely. The things I've been learning from this event, one skill set of mine that I think, and I actually noticed, I just listened to your podcast with your dad, your very first one. And he was like, you know, honey, like you're hard to say no to. And you were like, oh, I'm persuasive. And I am exactly the same way. And but I think with that, so certainly, yes, there's some charisma and persuasiveness that comes into trying to get people on board. But there's also this notion that in today's day and age, like we don't have a lot of things and opportunities to get involved with things that we can really work our butts off and have something that feels worthwhile to be part of. Like there's not a lot of things in our culture these days where we can just all come together, work super hard and pull something off. Like that's not a thing that happens anymore.
That's sad.
It is sad and it's a problem. And I think we need to focus on that just as for humanity right now. But if you think in the old days, like we would raise barns together. That was just what you did. We need all hands on deck. We need to pitch in and look what we can do when we work together. And it's that feel good. It still amazes me. We have 90 staff and most of them are volunteer unpaid staff, friends and family that fly in or drive in across the state and work, a week straight, super hard, hot, dry, dusty conditions. And they do it for the fun of it, to be part of something worthwhile. And and so instead of feeling like I'm asking too much of everyone, it's, I've had to reframe it in my head of like, it's actually like, it's almost a gift to invite people to be part of something that they are excited to be part of.
That's a beautiful point. One I honestly probably didn't really consider, but I think you're so right. I've used the phrase for the adjectives like everything feels very empty and vapid. Like vapid is a word. I like that word. But it just feels like you said, we aren't collectively coming together. Those natural mechanisms for that. Like, that's why I love small towns. And I think it's a part of who we are. And one of my goals is how do we revive that and bring that back? Because what I think it also adds for all the people, these 90 people, they have a sense of not only significance and meaning, deep meaning, but it truly is it's a source of pride. It's something that they get to say, I helped do that. And it's community, right? It's all of those things that naturally, like you said, just how we used to live created everyday opportunities for that. And now I think we need to be intentional about that.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things that we can do in small towns that bigger cities have a much harder time doing.
Totally agree. And I struggle on trying to figure out what is so darn important about rural and small towns that we need to capture and like apply to our broader culture, right? And looking at, how we take care of our neighbors in small towns. Even if we don't like them, we have to take care of each other because we depend on them because we're so remote. But looking at, everyone gets together for the brandings and the shippings and, that's the cow terms for those who aren't in the cattle operation. But, it's you invite all your neighbors to come and gather the cows and then brand them and ship them off throughout the year. There are all these like community work events. It's just how things work in small towns, right? And pitch in if there's a disaster or a fire or a tornado comes through or whatever it is, people pitch in. Those are the things that, and yes, throwing a big music festival in a cow pasture seems a bit construed with that, but it's the same principle of, because now our festival is a program of our nonprofit, and all this goes to some really good programs across the state and raising money for other small towns and farmers and ranchers. And there's the feel good side of it too, certainly, but I think there's a lot to be said for working hard together towards a common cause.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think it's important, like I asked you right away, a mindset for you, as the person leading this whole thing. I would imagine there were times where you were like, oh, I don't want to ask. And again, you're talking about a huge group of people. Yep. And yet I think, and this is silly, it's might seem like a silly comparison, but in my book, I write about my mom starting a pumpkin patch. That was the business that brought me home, which is crazy to say because it wasn't about the money, but she needed my help. Our family, we don't have a huge family, but they would come, like you said, and it wasn't a week long, but they would all come and we'd schedule them for weekends, and their whole family would come down and help us for nothing. We'd pay them in pumpkins, no kidding. But it was something that we were all a part of. There is something so special about that. And I think the more technology driven we all become, the less we seek those things out. And that's something I'm actively trying to change in my community, bringing people together face to face for real and working on something of significance and meaning together. That's who we are. And sometimes I just think we've forgotten as we strive to keep up with all the things that are fleeting, right? It's a hard thing, but yeah. Okay. So that was one. What else?
So the other element
comes to mind,
and you touched on it briefly, and this, honestly, I can't say that this is of any intent on my end. So White Sulphur, when I moved here in 2005, and I didn't know this at the time, but my first Chamber of Commerce meeting, The Economist had just released an article naming Meagher County as the lowest income of any in the entire nation.
What?
And
the whole nation.
The whole country. And
oh, wow.
And that, that was just a circumstance that I had chosen to live here, and I, chose to pitch in and help as things, just as a community member. So that was 2005, started the festival in 2011. And then we see a lot, thousands and thousands of people coming every summer, and they start noticing this place and that it is a beautiful, classic small town. And we have these amazing hot springs and the Smith River and all this public land around us, and Showdown Ski Hill and great hunting and fishing and all the good things, and the beautiful ag landscape, and we're only an hour and a half from a lot of the big cities in the state. And once it kind of got on the map, or it got bolder on the map in a little bit, people just knew of it. So then we start seeing people come year round, and the spa hotel is booked out every single weekend year round now. And then we see the Department of Transportation decides to put in new streets and sidewalks for our whole downtown, and then a local organization did a let's put carriage lanterns up and down Main Street, and they called it Get Lit White Sulphur. It was a great fundraising campaign. And so now we have beautification on Main Street, and we have a new school and a new library and a new brewery and new beer stores and new restaurants. And it's the kind of thing almost where you see a little spark of hope and everyone starts perking up. And the thing that I see most is community members and citizens here. It seems like there's more pride getting built in our community collectively. And once the momentum starts rolling, it just snowballs and oh, maybe I should start a bakery, and maybe I should do this, or, this is possible now. And this is by no means of any design of me as a community developer at all. But the reality is the festival brings money and excitement and has developed some pride in town, for sure.
It's huge economic impact.
Huge. And
that is something that I think, again, we just don't think about it. There's no reason for people to travel to my small town. In terms of what they would come there for specifically. We're a pretty standard little small town, and we talk about this. And yet I've said to people in defense of what I'm trying to build in our small town, I have said people will travel to us. It's not, right now we're not giving them a reason to. And that's the difference, right? The only people that come back now are the people that have family that still live there, whatever. But when you choose to look at it that way, it impacts everything. And I think, to me, they're kind of separate. So economic impact is a big deal. And then people, like you said, it puts you on the map in a more obvious way. And suddenly, there's investment going back in, which is so cool. Such a beautiful side effect of the festival, which was not you could claim it as part of your strategic plan, but it was one of those beautiful, look at that. This is amazing. But I think the second thing you talked about, and I'd separate them, is that idea of a spark of hope, that you did something that honestly, it's like, again, not only did you start a business in a very, very small town where you had very little natural network, you built it and you chipped in and found your way through that, but then to build this festival. But people are like, wow, my dream is, maybe their dream isn't like on the scale of any of that. And they suddenly say, I think this is something that I could do. And I think entrepreneurship is one of the key economic drivers for small towns, because we can, it's the barriers to entry are just smaller. They are. And a lot of times I've heard people say, but we don't have the people. What would you say to people that say that? Because I get it. Like, it feels like naturally you'd be better off if you were going to start a brick and mortar in a big community. But what would you say in response to people that say that?
Well, there are a few things. I think obviously it's great to have external dollars come and be spent in our community, right? With some level of tourism or attraction. But that being said, I think community projects and businesses should ideally be designed around what our community needs for a product or a service. And I think once you do that, if it's designed authentically for who and where we are, then the others will come in. But I think we can't, and so often tourist type things, they overlook the locals, and they just want to get the big money from the big cities coming in or whatnot, and they cater to that. But I think really catering to the locals and what can we do to better our community, what service can we provide that makes sense for us, and then if the hunters come in and want to stay and use that service or buy that product, excellent. But and that can be tweaked, and that's not necessarily a foolproof business model by any means. But I think that makes a lot more sense in my mind.
Right. Yeah,
and then you think about but then with Red Ants pants, I'm not going to sell enough pants with a population of 900 people here, even though the core customer is, the rancher woman here, and it has to be supplemented by redantspants.com, where we can ship and distribute all over the world from our storefront in our little distribution center here in White Sulphur. But it's still designed for that core customer in a core place. So I think there's both ends of that for sure. And if you've got to be creative, you've got to diversify. But if you think about small towns, we have better internet. We have fiber optic cable running to every single building in this whole county. We have better internet than Bozeman or Billings in White Sulphur Springs.
We have the same in my community. We are blessed with fiber internet, and it's just astounding. I mean, it's astounding. So, I think what you've just touched on is one of the things that I still feel somehow like a lot of small town, either entrepreneurs or people might be missing, is just that it's about where you originate. So like you said, everything, if it's built and designed for your local customer and you create, and then you stay really close to them, right? So it feels personal and it feels high touch and it feels relevant, like all those things that I honestly think make all the difference. And that's why all of the retail, like the big retail stores, are falling apart because they don't deliver that, right? They don't offer that in any way, shape, or form. But then saying this is something that other people in places like this, who are people like this, will want, and taking advantage of this big, wide, beautiful world that we get to benefit from without leaving the safety and the security and the warmth and comfort of our little town, right?
Yep.
It does take both. It does take both. But you've touched on something. I think designing it for the local, designing it for the people that you live and do life with, I think it's an important distinction.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And if you think about small towns, there's the cost of living is lower. The quality of living is higher, in my opinion, at least. You've got usually very affordable real estate and often historic buildings that need renovation and life breathed back into them, often on Main Street, that are incredible. Right. You've got usually a workforce that is ready for some employment we have better workforce here in Marr County than like the fast food restaurants can't even get. They're incredibly they're having a horrible time trying to find employees in Bozeman right now because it's hopping so much. And I just think of all those things when, and we have, a lot of us are blessed with good healthcare and education and all the, there's the basics that people want to move to a town. And then when you look at the actual statistics of what draws young people to town, yes, it's good jobs, education, healthcare, all that, and housing is a big one. But number one is art and culture.
Yeah.
So if we can provide that,
fascinating.
That's what we want, something to do. We want something fun. And if you can get all those boxes checked, it's not that hard to attract people to come back to small towns and start your business there. It makes sense in my mind.
It does. Yeah. I wish you could come to my small town and see the building that I'm attempting to renovate. It checks every little box of what you just said. Right in the middle of Main Street. It was my grandparents' building. They ran a Ben Franklin store from it when I was a little girl. So it just feels like it's supposed to have life breathe back into it, But the other thing, that you touched on right at the very beginning, we were talking about when I asked you, how you got over your transplantness. And you said, I got involved in all these things. This is something that I would love to hear your perspective on this, because I just really believe in people being our primary asset, wherever we are. And in small towns, it's particularly true, because if we invest in people, we invest in one another, and that one person touches many different facets of small town life, so if you go and you learn a new skill, even, I don't know, something as simple as, it's going to be a bad example, maybe conflict resolution, I don't know, whatever, I don't care. It's something that would be on the soft skill side of things. You learn how to do any one little thing better. And then you take that skill into coaching volleyball and working on the chamber and being an EMT. You effectively improve everything around you. And that is something I feel so passionately about for small towns. What do you think about that? What's your perspective on it?
I love it. And it's, again, sharing the gifts we all have and the perspectives and experience, and framing it in that light of, is it fundraising for the Rotary Club, or is it, there's so many elements of, with our Arts Council, we just had a sculptor move to town, and he's excited to get programs for art, better, more diverse programs into the school for kids, and do special sculpting projects. And just, there's so many, we all have so many skills, and just thinking about them as community assets to really, we all rise together.
Right. And I think that there is just latent potential and talent throughout every small town. And I think sometimes it's just, we need to have a mechanism or a way for people to know that we desire to know what your skills are. It's just good stewardship,
And to ask, when someone new moves to town, reach out to them and see what they are interested in. And I wouldn't have even known there was an Arts Council, except Judy Berger runs the post office. She knew I was new in town because she had filled out my PO box. And, as soon as I'm there, she just says, "Hey, would you want to get involved in the Arts Council?" And then someone else saw my EMT sticker on my car and chased me down and said, "Hey, will you join the ambulance?" And, you just don't be afraid to ask the newcomers too, and invite them to get involved. Because I think, it is intimidating coming into a new community as an outsider. That's a good element too.
So what is next for Red Ants Pants and the foundation? What are you working on now?
So the Red Ants Pants Foundation is our 501c3 branch that is in support of women's leadership, working family farms and ranches, and rural communities. So one of our big program is the festival, and that is also the fundraiser for our foundation. Additionally, we have a grant program where we've gifted over $110,000 with proceeds from the event out to different projects across the state, which has been really neat to see what's possible there. We also have a timber skills class, which is teaching women how to run chainsaws and do carpentry every fall for about 4 days. Cool. Really fun. That's in September usually. So check out redantspantsfoundation.org for more info there. And we're hoping to expand that program. And then similarly, we are in our second year of our new girls leadership program. So this is an in-depth year-long program for junior year high school girls from rural Montana. We only select 8 every season, and we pair them up with a young professional mentor. And we have 3 retreats throughout the week or throughout the year. And then we do webinars in between. So they learn the really hard and soft skills of leadership at these retreats. They work with their mentor. They do a community project back in their hometown. And we're really trying to instill more hope for our youth, pride in our rural communities, and strength and courage in their leadership.
That's awesome. I love. And it's almost a cohort model of sorts, right? Because I imagine the group of 8 girls become fast friends, lifelong friends. Think of what they're going to create together. Right?
Oh, I can't wait.
So, it's so phenomenal. Yeah. Really, and that's just in Montana for now?
Yep, for now. Yep, but that certainly has potential to scale and replicate. But I just love the idea of really intentionally building this good old girls club for them as kind of an alumni network of this program, and see where they can be, because and not a judgment, but that's just what men have had for for centuries, right? But it hasn't really been built into the culture around women and women in business or women in community leadership or church leadership or politics. There's so many leadership opportunities, not just traditional politics or business. So it's really fun to be able to have a hand in that game too.
Oh, that's fantastic. Sarah, you're just such an inspirational and again, just humble and genuine person. I'm really, really grateful that I got the chance to meet you. I think you planted some seeds in me that took root and they didn't leave entirely. And I'm still working on things, but I'm grateful for the work that you're doing. And I appreciate you coming on the show. Seriously.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure for sure. I love talking about small towns.
Yeah. So with that, I always try to ask every guest before they leave me, what does living big in a small town mean to you?
I think it can mean whatever we want it to mean. And I love the freedom in that. And I love the potential and the possibilities of, I kind of think of it as modern day pioneering now. We're really, the sky is the limit, especially as women now. I mean, we can go as big as we can dream, and it's exciting to see what's possible.
Absolutely. Well, everything that we talked about, we will get all the links to your amazing workwear for the women that are listening that are like, what? Where have these been all my life? I'm sure there's people that are going to feel that way. And the festival as well. We'll get all the links in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Small Town Big Talk Show. If you enjoyed today's show, we invite you to subscribe on Stitcher, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, and we'd love for you to leave us a 5-star review. The more reviews we get, the easier it will be for other small town friends to find us. We encourage you to keep on living big in your small town, because the size of your life is not determined by your zip code.